This is the Schoolish Podcast, where we interrogate data, tell stories, and have conversations that most people would never have about school. Now, if you've been rocking with me since the school sucks days, thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with this podcast and hearing all these great and crazy ideas. Schoolish, we're going to switch it up a little bit. I wanted to do something more creative. I wanted to do something bigger, more expansive, that really captures everything about the conversation that I've been looking to have about school. So one of the things that we're going to do on this podcast is tell stories. We're also going to interrogate data, and I'm also going to have some guests on the show. But really, I wanted to capture the essence of what people are thinking, believing, and understanding about school so that you and I can use this podcast as data itself to actually do the work of reinvention, rethinking, and redesigning the school system. So this segment is called School Story. And School Story is where I will talk to a guest. They'll submit an audio recording, and we'll hear their school story. So first up, me. This is the Schoolish Podcast, and this is a school story. Mike Yates. My school story starts with two words. School sucks. I grew up hating school. Yeah, I didn't think it was for me. I didn't see how school would prepare me for the future. I felt like my teachers always were like holding back something that like they knew something about the world that they weren't going to tell me. They weren't ready to tell me, and that like if I were to figure it out somehow, they'd want to keep that quiet. You know, I can remember like when I was in elementary school, we were watching this video about Christopher Columbus arriving on the shores of the United States, and they positioned Columbus like everybody does as the man who discovered America. And when he rolls up on the U.S. In the video, there are these natives waving at him, and my hand shoots up in the air. I'm buzzing with excitement because I think I've figured something out, and I say to my kindergarten teacher, Miss Webb, I said, "Hey, if Columbus is the first guy that discovered America, who are those brown people waving at him?" And what I thought would be like a moment for praise and excitement was actually a moment for my teacher to shoo me out of the classroom, sit me in the hallway for the duration of the video, and come out and tell me later on that I shouldn't be shouting out. I should wait on her to call on me, and that my comment was inappropriate. And I couldn't figure out, sometimes to this day, I can't figure out why the heck that was inappropriate, but I guess it was just not time for us to know that Columbus was actually like an evil colonizer. So I think that sort of story is how I got my start in hating school. Elementary school was okay. It was nothing to write home about, but it was also nothing horrible really after that moment. But what changed everything for me was a moment I had in the seventh grade. Before the seventh grade, I didn't necessarily enjoy school, but I didn't full on hate school. It was like a mild annoyance. And I did think my mom was a teacher herself. She was an eighth grade algebra teacher and really loved that. She loved math. She loved working with students and would spend long hours at the school. So I have like all these memories of going up to her school and staying there all day long while she worked and graded. And I thought to myself, like, I will never do that as a career. But anyway, I got to middle school, and I had gone to this poetry and writing camp over the summer, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought of myself as a pretty good writer because that's what I was told by my camp instructors and counselors. So I was really excited to get some writing assignments at school, and crush those. So I was in my an English class in the 7th grade. My teacher's name was Miss McGowan, and Miss McGowan was an interesting woman because she was this, like, at the time, pretty young teacher. Long blonde hair and like really bright blue eyes, and what she called a goofy smile. She's a very like large smile. And the day that I walked into her class, I can't tell you that I had a bad feeling about it, or that I didn't think that she was a competent teacher. It was normal. She was just another teacher in a system that I didn't know much about. Um, that was until I submitted my first paper in her class. We had to write this paper, and I don't remember what it was about to this day. Like I don't. But I remember what happened when I submitted that paper. Matter of fact, I just read this tweet that said this dude looks like the type of dude whose teacher handed them their paper face down after they graded it. And that's what happened to me, sort of. I worked all night on this paper, and I turned it in. And a few days later, when it was time for her to return them, she was handing out papers, and she did not hand me mine back. And she said, "Hey, come see me after class." Now, y'all know what "come see me after class" means. That means like something is wrong. So immediately my heart starts racing. There's all these questions. I'm like, what is going on? I'm thinking like, man, either she's going to like reward me, or she's going to tell me that she lost my paper and I have to do it again. But what she actually said is something that I could not expect. After class, everybody shuffled out. The bell rang. I've got my backpack in hand, and I'm standing there in front of Miss McGowan while she leans on the desk with that same sort of goofy smile that she talked about. And she says, "Michael, I'm just going to come out with it. I don't think you wrote this paper." And immediately, I experienced this feeling that was like being crushed, but like being angry about it. And I immediately said, "Well, look, I wrote the paper. I stayed up all night. I worked really hard. My mom saw me. She saw me working all night in this paper. Like, you can go ask her." Pause. At this point, it's important to note that my mom worked at the same school, and her classroom was down the freaking hall. Miss McGowan said, "Michael, I'm not going to go talk to your mom about this. I'm not going to consult her. I don't believe that you wrote this paper. In my professional opinion, there is not a 7th grader on planet Earth that writes like this." That's when my surprise and shock turned to extreme anger. Because I realized, even as a 7th grader, that she couldn't just say, "Hey, great job on this. Like, you're an exceptional writer. We should look for other opportunities outside of school to keep you writing." Her knee-jerk response at reading exceptional writing was that it had to be cheating. So I went home. I told my mom, "Look, I got a 0 on this paper. She says I didn't write it. You know I wrote it. I know I wrote it. Like, what am I going to do?" And my mom says, "Well, look, there's this tool, turnitin.com. Not everybody's really using it yet, but there's some people that are using it, having great success. It's a plagiarism catcher. Suggest that you use it." So I said, "Hey, Miss McGowan, the next day, let's use turnitin.com." Now, if you are familiar with turnitin.com, it gives you a percentage score, which is called an originality report. And the lower the percentage is, that means the less amount of plagiarism is actually like present. So like getting 2% is better than 10%, right? My originality report comes back, and it was 2%, which meant that there was no plagiarism present in this paper. Like I hadn't copied and pasted any sentences from anywhere on the internet. And she said to me, no, this is too new. In my professional opinion, you didn't write the paper. So again, I went home bubbling with anger. In my heart of heart, in that moment, I figured something out about school. At least I thought I did. 7th grade Mike decided at that moment that school was no longer a place where people wanted to help me. Right? Like I put evidence in front of my teacher's face that like this was my work. And her response was that her professional opinion said that I not only was I smart enough to write a paper that is fooling an algorithm that had been around for at that time, like I think maybe it was like it had to be like 5 or 6 years at that time. Right. But she just wouldn't trust that I had written this paper. So I actually took my fight all the way up to the principal. I went to the principal of the school. I said, this is not fair. Here's the originality report. And the principal actually said, I will not intervene in this issue because this grade is at the discretion of the teacher. And I was crushed. I was hurt. I was caught up in this moment where I was forced to decide like what I was going to do. And at that point, the grade was like so secondary. It's like not even, I'm like, I didn't even care about the grade anymore. I just cared that I was being done wrong by a system that was supposed to be educating me, one that my mother worked for, one that I watched her stay up until midnight lesson planning and grading, and I was like stuck at school with her until 8 p.m. Like that system that was running my mother into the ground was now actively working against me. The last conversation I had with my mom about this, she looked at me and said, look, this is totally unfair. You've done everything you can to fight this, and there is still a lesson in it. And my mom said, look, you can continue to fight by being absolutely the best at all times, or you can let this woman win. And from that moment, I sort of made it my mission to poke and prod at the school system. And little did I know that poking and prodding as a student, the skeptical eye that I looked at everything with, the questions that I would ask, right? Like, why do we have to have lockers? Why do we have to sit in school from 7 o'clock until 4 o'clock, right? The questions that I would ask would end up defining my career. Today, I work at the Reinvention Lab that's sponsored by Teach for America. And I work on reinventing school so that those moments never happen again. And that's my school story. That school story was from me, Mike Yates. That's the first of the school story segment, one that you will hear from many, many voices. I'm going to go capture some of the voices from episodes that we've already done when this podcast used to be called School Sucks. Next episode, listen in for John Marty's school story. John is a LinkedIn top voice. He's one of the number one people that you should be searching for on the internet if you want career advice. He's a top 20 YouTube account for job seekers and career advice. He's the founder of Project 1B, which is trying to help 1 billion people find their purpose. And I'm going to capture his school story from the episode that he and I did, which is actually the first guest episode on the School Sucks podcast ever. So look forward to that in the next episode of Schoolish. Thank you for tuning into the first episode of Schoolish, a podcast where we interrogate data, tell stories, and have conversations that most people are not having about education. I hope you're super, super excited about this podcast because I am. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, make sure to rate us, leave a review, because that goes a long way to getting these messages out. You can find this podcast anywhere you catch your podcast. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel to catch bonus content and a whole bunch of exclusive live chat interviews with some of the most amazing people in education. Thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you on the next one.